Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session by Kalinga Literary Festival in association with Niyogi Books. From Jodha Akbar to Padmavat, from Panniyin Selvan to the Palace of Illusions, historical fiction always enamors us. But have you ever wondered how these stories are woven and how writers manage to bring historical figures alive with their works? Today we have the opportunity to hear from Malathi Ramachandran, a reader, writer, traveler, and Indophile whose several identities merged and blended in her works, resulting in four full-length novels and lots of short stories published over the last 2 decades. She's a master's in mass communication who began writing by dabbling in features and travel writing until she found her forte in fiction. Among her many short stories, two have won prizes by the British Council short fiction contests. Her last novel, Mandu, won the first prize in the category of historical fiction at Coimbatore Literary Awards. Begum Hazrat Mahal, her fifth novel, is an inspiring story of a fighter queen that exemplifies the power of womanhood. Her plots and characters are often inspired by her rich and varied experiences. She finds forgotten stories hidden among the ruins of old monuments and forts, and these stories inspire her to reimagine and rewrite them as historical fiction. Ms. Ramachandran also conducts creative writing workshops for adults and children under the brand name Melting Pot. She will be in conversation with Ms. Sutapa Basu, a best-selling, award-winning author as well as an educationist, poet, storyteller, and a translator. She is well known for her best-selling historical fiction, Padmavati, The Queen Tells Her Own Story. Her second historical fiction initiated the Invader series with The Legend of Genghis Khan, continued with The Curse of Nadir Shah. This novel won the Best Fiction Award by Author Awards in 2020. She is the 2016 first prize winner of Times of India's Right India campaign, while her debut psychological thriller, Dangle, was nominated for the Anupam Kher Award for Best Debut English Novel in 2017. Ms. Basu's short stories and poems have also appeared in renowned magazines and anthologies. We are delighted to have these two eminent authors with us today to share their insights and wisdom. I will now hand over the mic to Sutapa ma'am.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Shisha. And thank you, Kalinga Litfest, Bhava Samvad, that you have us all here. And welcome also to Malathi Ramachandran, the author of so many historical novels which have won awards. And I think, Malathi, our conversation about history and why it intrigues us is going to be interesting.
I
So,
think
shall
so.
we start the discussion? So,
Yes,
Malik,
please.
like I
Yes.
said, most of your books are based on history. So, is it that you have been attracted to history right from childhood?
Thank you, Sutapa. First, I just want to thank Kalinga Litfest for this honor of asking me to be on this discussion. And thank you, Shrisha, for the introduction. Sutapa, to answer your question, yes, I have always been fascinated by India's past. In fact, for me, it is like, it's the charm of, sort of lifting a veil and looking down the centuries to see where we've come from, what all we've gone through, all the drama out there that has happened, all the, conquests and the invasions and the people fighting for beautiful women, battles for beautiful women, and then also the cultural renaissance of each period. It's a very, very interesting history that we have inherited, and it does fascinate me. But if you ask me, did I enjoy history as a student? No, I didn't. It was, of course, a subject in school, and I didn't really enjoy it because it was nothing but very dry narration. They were just facts and names of people who invaded, and they were dates and all those things, wars and battles and things like that. It was very dry. So for me, it was not about the narration itself, because below the layers of narration, of the larger narrations of history, I think there are a lot of stories, hidden stories, which is what fascinates me. there are stories of people, there are stories of relationships, there is so much of courage, fortitude, suffering. All this has fascinated me forever. And for me, it's like when I go on a trip to a historical site, I'm looking not just at the historical monuments, but looking for stories there. And these stories are usually hidden in the between the stones of the monument. I mean, very metaphorically speaking. And they would be, just lying in the dust. And I pick them up and then I dust them off, and then I want to hold them up to the light so that people recognize what their past is and what the stories of the past are. So that is how I came to write historical fiction.
And also, Malathi, history has always, history is never dead. People say history is dead and it's about dead people. It's never dead. And in fact, I believe history is also not the past, because everything that happens, in the
Today.
past, it is, related to what is happening around us today. So unless we
Absolutely.
know what's happened before, we
Hmm.
will never understand, the events of what is happening around us. And
Hmm.
keeping that in mind, both of us are from the armed forces. We've both, grown up with army officer fathers, and both, I think it was coincidental that both our fathers have served, in a region which was called the Northeast Frontier region, the NIFA, right, which has now become Arunachal
Absolutely.
Pradesh. And your
Absolutely.
first book, The Wheel Turns, is set against the background of, what was called NIFA during the Chinese aggression. So, and the whole event, or the whole war of 1962 has also had a lot of influence on my psyche. So, how much of that story was personal?
Yes. Actually, first thing is, it's indeed true that both of us have a common root in the army. Both of us are children of army officers. And my father was an infantry officer. And his regiment in 1962, when the Chinese made incursions into the Northeast, which is now Arunachal Pradesh, in those days it was known as the NEFA, Northeastern Frontier Agency. So when the Chinese came in, many regiments were pulled out from the stations they were in, and they were sent to augment the forces already fighting the Chinese. So my father's regiment also, we were in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh, and my father's regiment was sent. I was a small child at that point in time, and I was a bystander to all this drama, all that everything that happened, and probably it got embedded in my psyche. And at some point in time, it did come out as my debut novel. As they say, debut novels are always autobiographical. And this one, although the story is not mine, because it's not my personal story, it's a story of a couple where the man goes to war to the Chinese and he doesn't come back, and then how she waits for 3 years and he's not dead. So this story was, sort of just a fictionalized form of it. But it does have it. It is autobiographical in soul and spirit, as all as all debut novels are.
I'm sure it must be extremely interesting. You've already given us a tiny glimpse, and I think I'm going to pick that up and read it,
I
and
hope
I'm
so.
sure it will resonate as much with me.
I'm
Now,
sure it will.
keeping that in mind,
Yes.
so it was your, your father's tenure there, and the stories you must have heard as a child, which instigated you to write your debut novel, The Wheel Turns. What
Hmm.
instigated you to pick up Hazrat Mahal and her role in the 1857 freedom fight?
Very interesting question. Thank you. Actually, it was on a tour to Lucknow. Just as a tourist, we had gone there. And as I said, I'm always looking for a story in the monuments. So when we went there, we saw that, I've actually started from the other side, from the residency side. We went there for a tour because unfortunately, the Indian side of it is hardly there. The monuments are all gone except for a few tombs. There's hardly anything left. So when we went to see the residency, it's a very, very, very beautiful layout. It's a walled cantonment with some of the buildings still standing there. And it was really interesting that I saw bullet wounds on the outer walls of all the buildings. It was pockmarked with bullet marks. So that set me thinking that there's a story here, and people have suffered and gone through a lot of trauma. So when I came back, I started researching that part of it as 1857, what exactly happened at that time. As you know, the British call it the Sepoy Mutiny, and we don't call it by that because that is is too smaller, it's too slighting a word for that huge thing that happened. So when I researched, I found that Hazrat Mahal was the hero of this first war of independence, and then how she brought the forces together, what all she did. She actually achieved the near impossible. She brought a motley group of people together, which included, Hindus, Muslims, high caste Hindus. Then they had the Dalits. Then there were the poor farmers, the landlords, the merchants, the small traders. She brought everyone below her, together under her leadership, and she led them to battle, and with a lot of strategy. And she has done her planning so beautifully, along with the help of very close associates such as Raja Jailal, who was not just a close friend but also a confidant. Then there were others also who were her very close inner circle. They together planned this, and she was the main force, I would say. And they took this residency to siege, and it's not easy to keep the British inside the residency for 148 days. Her forces held them to siege, and that was a huge thing which almost brought the British to their knees. And I say almost because until you read the book, my readers will not know exactly what happened. What exactly happened to the British after those 148 days. So she did this huge achievement. So when I read about this, and I realized that does not exist in the collective consciousness of the Indian today the way others exist. I mean, forget about people like Gandhi, Nehru, and Sardar Patel. They were very big luminaries. I'm talking about other women freedom fighters, such as Lakshmi Bai is well known. You have Sarojini Naidu, you have Kasturba Gandhi, you have Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, all of those times, and they're all so well known. Whereas she and Rani Jindal of Lahore, these were the people who were not really well known at that time. I mean, till today, we don't know much about them, till books are written about them. So I decided that she needs to be talked about, she needs to be written about. And the reason is not just because she was such a courageous woman, not just because she brought everyone under her leadership, but also because we owe it to her for the sacrifices she made. And as they say, there is as everyone knows, there is a very famous inscription on a unknown soldier's tomb in Kohima, which says, "When you go home, tell them of us. Say that for your tomorrows we gave our yesterday. For your tomorrow we gave our today." So for that reason, I think we owe it to her to write about her, to read about her.
So I'll just show this book, which was really very, very interesting, very intriguing when I went through it. So I would suggest to everybody to pick this up and read it through, like Malathi said. Now, a lot of research, because after all, Hazrat Mahal lived. Begum Hazrat Mahal was absolutely a living figure, historical figure. So a lot of research must have gone into creating that story. Now, what I would like to ask is that this book is not a non-fiction; it is a fictional, portrait. So,
Yes.
how much of the historical facts that you must have uncovered from Hazrat Mahal's life, how much of that is there in the book, and how did you decide which parts should be fictional?
Actually, Hazrat Mahal, there's not, as I said, she was not so well known as the other freedom fighters. There is information on her, and there's a little bit about her childhood, a little bit about her youth, how she met the Nawab, how she married him, how she became his favorite Begum. That is there on the personal side. As far as the First War of Independence is concerned, there is information there, but it is not enough for me to build a complete rounded personality. So I had to draw on things like, see, I knew already, they said she was a strategist and she was a strong warrior. But beyond that, I had to build from things like she built a regiment of women warriors called the Viranginis, and that showed her this feminist facet of her personality. Then there were other things like this which I picked up on, how brilliant she was as a strategist. So I picked up these and then built her personality based on that. But there is a lot of fact in fiction. The historical facts, I really could not take liberties with, as far as the personalities who actually were there at that particular time, whether it is British or Indian. I have kept to the same personalities. I have maintained them by name, and whatever role they played, I have maintained that. And whereas there is a lot of there are other characters I have brought in to sort of supplement the story, and to build a plot and to take the plot forward, I needed more imaginary characters. So there are characters built in, there is Hazrat's actual persona, there is so much that goes into it. And as I always say, historical fiction is neither history nor fiction, it's a combination. So I would visualize it as a sort of tapestry where one side you have the warp and one side you have the weft. So the warp is the historical facts which I don't play around with, and the weft is the imaginary story that I built, the fictionalized part of it. So when these two blend together and form a fabric, all you see is the fabric. You really cannot tell the two apart. So yes, there are a lot of historical facts and there are a lot of fictional part of it. I have blended them together to complete the picture and to give her a rounded personality.
Beautiful. And I really could not make out where did the fact end and where did the fiction start. It was so beautifully woven in. So I mean, congratulations on that. I love that. I love that about the book. And so all your books, whether it's Kuldhara or it's Mandu and now it's the Begum Hazrat Mahal, we always find that there is a very strong streak of feminism. As you said that you spoke about the Virangini, I mean, you came to know about the Viranginis, which showed her feminist streak. So, but all your women protagonists have this feminist streak. And we also find Hazrat Mahal and her relationship with this British officer called Kenneth. Now, was Kenneth fictional or was he a fact? Let's first find that out.
Kenneth was fictional. Kenneth was fictional, and he was a literary tool. I'll just take a minute to say this, that he was a literary tool I had to create, because I had a plot which was going on inside the residency, and I had a plot which was going on in her Cholaki Koti, where she formed all her battle plans. So I needed a connection between the two. Before the battle started, there has to be a connection. So Kenneth comes in as a literary tool there to bring it.
Wow, great. Now, while we're talking about feminist women, I just want to bring in a small trope which has attracted me, which is that, men are known for their brawn, right? So if there's a fight, they will try and use their physical strength to win the fight. Now, women don't have that advantage, but women always have the advantage of their beauty. So would you say it's justified when a woman will use her beauty to win a war, bring things to her side, try to sort of find out information like, she did with Kenneth, actually. Hazrat Mahal did that with Kenneth. She realized that he is attracted to her and she used that, his attraction to sort of get information from him. Do you think that's justified?
Okay, so I'll answer this part first and then the first part of your question second. Well, yes, I'll tell you why. Because this what you talk about as, maybe what women spies in those days did. Like, for example, I will say that, Mata Hari of the First World War, and then there was Betty Pack of the Second World War. These were women spies who used their sexual prowess to get information. But they were mercenaries. They were not fighting for their own land. They were mercenaries fighting for an agency in another land. They were just doing this work for money. So they were mercenaries. Whereas in Hazrat Mahal's case, she was not a mercenary. She was a woman who loved her Awadh, and she wanted to somehow get the Britishers out, and she wanted to get her land back for her people and for her son. So for her, in her case, I would not equate her with a spy, a person who would get information using her attraction. I would not use that. I would say she's a brilliant strategist. What she used, like she herself says in the book, if you remember, she says, all's fair in love and war, Kenneth Sahib. So she uses it as it's fair in war. And he's a little confused. He says, is it love or war in this case? He's still trying to get her attention. So he says, what about love? She says, this is all fair in war and love. And that is her method of getting information about the British, purely for her patriotic feelings and for the love of her land. So that is the second part of your question I answered. The first part about feminism, yes. See, all my female protagonists are feminists. The reason is, even in those days, whether it is a few centuries back, women were strong. They had the strength of character, but unfortunately, they lived in a very patriarchal society, a very male dominated society, where actually they could not do much. So each of my heroines, my female protagonist, if that's a better word, each of them has taken things into her own hands at a point in time. They all start from a point of weakness, and then with their strength of character, they manage to come to a point where they believe in something, they do according to what their value system is. So they move to that, and their strength is only an inner strength. It is not something they can show outside. They cannot change the world, but they were able to change their own fate and their own destiny because of their feminism and their strong streak of not giving in until they do what they believe in. So all of them, whether it be Pari and Parvati in the legend of Kuldhara, then you have Rupmati in Mandu. Then you have Begum Hazrat Mahal in this new book. All of them, they were very weak when they started off. Pari and Parvati were both at the mercy of male chauvinism. Both of them with the same man, in fact. So that was their problem. But still, by the end of the book, you realize, yes, they have done what they wanted to do. They have not given in to these forces of patriarchy. And again, Mandu, when the Sultan comes to take her away to his fort, she puts down conditions. She says, there is a condition under which I will come with you, not otherwise. And luckily, he's good enough to agree to the condition because he's a man of principles. He takes her back. But at the end, what happens when Akbar's army comes to take her away after hearing about her beauty and her talent? They come to take her away. At that point, again, she decides to take things into her own hand and does what she thinks is correct. So again, in Begum Hazrat Mahal's case, I'd like to expand on this because Begum Hazrat Mahal is actually, she starts from a point of strength. Let's face it, that she was already the Begum, but she was also the Begum of the man who had left. The Nawab had left for Calcutta. He had not stayed on. He had not stayed on to fight the British. So she was actually alone. And she has moved from the Chattar Manzil, her beautiful palace on the banks of the river Gomti. She has been moved into a small house called the Cholaki Koti, which was once the royal barber's residence. So she stays there. She just has 2 maidservants, and she plans and plots and strategizes the battles against the British on her own. So this is the first streak of feminism that we see. Then the second streak is when Uda Devi, one of the village women, a Dalit woman from a small village of Awadh, when she comes to Hazrat and she says that I would like to join, and there are many women here in my villages and all the villages around who would like to join your forces and fight the British. She says, yes, I'm so happy because I'm going to fight and I want you all with me. We'll form a regiment of Viranginis and we shall fight the British together. So that is the second point where you come to know. Then throughout the battles, even when after the debacle of 1857, she comes back to fight in 1858. She again regroups in spite of all her personal losses. She decides to regroup and comes back. That shows her fortitude also. So she is a feminist through and through. And at one point in time, when Raja Jailal tells her women cannot fight, she says, you can say what you want. We will be there shoulder to shoulder with you all in the battlefield. So these are very strong women personalities. And I think even today, we can use them as our role models because it's in spite of all the forces against them, they managed to do what they believed.
In fact, if you read the history, British history, and you read about the 1857, there is always this question mark as to why did the Nawab leave, his Lucknow and the entire, his entire Nawabi
True.
and go to Kolkata. And why did he give in to what the British
Yes.
wanted? Right?
From what I understood, yeah. So from what I understand, he was planning to go to Kolkata and then talk to the Governor General and ask him to give him back his land and his whatever they had annexed of Awadh. He said he wanted to get back his kingdom, but it did not work out. So finally, he just stayed on in Calcutta, and he made it a very sparkling, beautiful place where, this little place that he's given. Finally, a lot of, firstly, he just went with 500 people, and then thousands more followed from Lucknow because it became again a central court of all the arts and music, dance, everything. He carried all the the color and the music there, and he created another world out there. So for him, that was very, very important. He was a flamboyant person who loved his arts. So and a poet, and he was a singer and a musician. So he carried it there. And I think his gamble did not pay off. He wanted to speak to the Governor General and ask him. His mother traveled all the way to England to meet Queen Victoria, and it didn't work out. So she finally came back, and halfway back, she died in France. His mother couldn't even achieve what she set out to do. So all these people who tried, the British were just too adamant about it, that we are taking away the princely states. We are annexing it because there's so much money there. We want everything. We want the land. We want the wealth. So they could do nothing about it. But Hazrat has to be commended for staying back and fighting.
I totally agree. I totally agree about that. That I think I don't know. This is again, I'm just speculating. Probably the Nawab was so much of an artist that he didn't have the
Yes,
warrior in him, which Hazrat
probably.
had. So,
Yes,
so
probably.
she stepped back and she said, if this doesn't work, then we have
Yes,
to face them with our weapons. And I think that's extremely commendable. And what you just told,
absolutely.
I mean, all the historical women that you mentioned just now, I think they were all women of substance. And
Yes.
at a time when it was extremely difficult to stand up for your rights, and they did it. And that courage and determination is something that should absolutely be lessons to us,
Absolutely.
who we break down at the tiniest of problems or difficulties.
Yes. Role
Uh,
models for this.
yeah. The other thing that
Yes.
this entire fight, the freedom fight that Hazrat Mahal led, as you mentioned it, that the kind of people who followed her. So in
Mm.
today's India, which unfortunately is so religiously and politically polarized, it's
Yes.
very difficult to imagine that all the people fought without any thought to which religion they belonged, what was their caste, what was their class. Everybody had that one aim, one purpose which actually drove them. Now,
Mm.
what I would like to ask you is that, was this just a special ability of Hazrat Mahal's leadership qualities, or was it also a kind of a very deep anger that Indians were feeling against the people whom they had welcomed as guests, but who simply decided to enslave the entire country?
Yes. Actually, just have to give you a little bit of background here. The British had, imposed very heavy taxes on the people. They had taken away the lands. The new land laws had come in. So the landlords were losing their land. Then the small farmers were suffering. The rich merchants were paying more tax than ever before. There were so many problems. There were conversions going on. The cloth weavers had lost their business because the cotton was being shipped to England. So there was so much of, sort of simmering anger, which was already there. And then the Nawab was exiled, and his kingdom was annexed. So this was sort of, just building up. And the last straw that broke the camel's back, I would say, because at this point in time, it was only simmering anger and people murmuring about it, talking about it, but not doing anything. As you saw in the book, Hazrat says, no more words, only action now. So they had only been talking about it. What really what triggered and galvanized this whole revolution and the rebellion, I would say, was what happened in Meerut. Just about 15 days before the Hazrat's armies, forces start doing anything, just 15 days before that, on the 10th of May in Meerut, there had been a shootout. The sepoys of the regiment, of a regiment over there, had gone and killed. They'd gone to a church service on a Sunday evening, and they had killed the officers and some wives and families of the officers. And then they started marching towards Delhi to talk to the emperor there, the Mughal emperor. So this all happened because of the Enfield rifle. The new Enfield rifle that the British had brought in had a requirement for the bullet to be opened by mouth. It had to be sort of broken open with the mouth, the shell of it, and that was greased with cow and pig fat. Now, both these are absolutely, anathema for Muslims and for Hindus. cow and pig fat. So they were very angry and they had protested. Nobody took any note of their protest. So they had gone and killed. As soon as Hazrat hears that there was a killing in Meerut and this is what has happened, she says, now is the time to act. Let's do it too. And then there is a small sporadic sort of shootout by the rebels in Lucknow in the residency, but they put it down. The British immediately put it down, so nothing happens. But meanwhile, she has got her army together, she's got ammunition, she's got money, she's got everything, supplies have come in, she's working very, very fast. And then she attacks at them at the Battle of Chinnat outside, just north of Lucknow. She attacks the British over there. So that is how it happens, that everybody comes together under her without thought of their religion or their political preference or anything like that. And that is why it was known, as it is, Lucknow is known for its Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. And her leadership style actually symbolized the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, where everybody works together and there is no difference between the religions.
I think you really laid it out in the most, analyzed the entire atmosphere of those times, that period, excellently, Malathi. So I think we have a few minutes, I think, and maybe you would like to read something from
Sure. Yes, let me read to you a couple of pages. This is about the formation of the Viranginis, and you'll know what I mean, that Hazrat was very happy to build a regiment of women warriors. Huzur, the maid spoke from the doorway. Yes, there is a woman here to see you. She says she wants to fight the Angrez with you. Hazrat sat up immediately. A woman to fight the Angrez? Send her in. They watched as a straight-backed figure strode in, wearing white cotton pajamas and kameez, with a dupatta that went up across her body and then came around and was tied at the waist. She bent low and then formally brought her hands together in a namaste. Hazrat stared at her for a long time. Who are you? I am Uda Devi, Huzur. I heard about your army of rebels who are readying to throw the Angrez out. I have immediately come from my village and wish to swear my allegiance to you. I want to join the army and fight side by side with the rest, if you will permit. Hazrat got up and clasped the other woman's hands warmly. Uda's hands were hard and calloused from working in the fields and tending to the cattle, but there was strength in them, the strength of courage and conviction. You and I, Uda, we will fight together. We may be the only women in a fight among men, but I think like me, you two are not afraid. I am not afraid, Huzur. They stared at each other, and energy like an electric current passed from one to the other and back. They felt charged, recharged, ready to undertake anything. Uda, can you ride? Yes, Huzur, I can. Good, then I shall put you in the cavalry regiment. We need more mounted soldiers for the speed and maneuverability that only fighting on horseback can provide. Huzur, if I may, Uda waited for permission to speak. Go ahead, Uda. There are many, many women like me in the villages around, and even here in every lane of Lucknow. They are all eager to fight the Angrez, but afraid to approach you like I have done. But why? Because they feel that being women, you may not find them suitable to join the rebel forces. Ah, but I am a woman too, Uda. If I can fight, so can every one of you. Ji, Huzur. I have only 2 questions for you and every woman behind you. Are you willing to put your country above your family? Are you ready to share your blood to destroy the enemy? Uda stood ramrod straight and nodded gravely. Yes, yes, Huzur. Hazrat stood up too and faced her. Bring me the names of all the women within a week, Uda. I shall create a regiment of Viranginis, the fearless women. She raised her fist in the air. Inqilab Zindabad. No more words, only action.
I think, I can feel the goosebumps. Beautiful. And this was really the most emotional and evocative part of your story, and lovely. I really enjoyed that. So I think I will suggest to everybody to pick up this book. Please read it, and I'm sure you will not even take a night to finish this book. It's so fast and it's so interesting and so intriguing. So thank you so much, Malathi. I think our time is generally up. So it was lovely,
Thank you,
talking to you, full of life, and I think everybody would be most interested in reading your book and your writing, your other books as well. I'm going to pick up the first one because that is really close to my heart as well. So thank you so much, Malik. Thank you, Kalinga Litfest and Bhava Samvad. Thank you, all the viewers, for being with us on this beautiful evening with another a very evocative author, Malathi Ramachandran. Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Shudapa, for this lovely discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. And thank you to all your listeners. Thank you to Kalinga Lit Fest and to Neogi Books. Thank you so much for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye bye.